A year ago, we were at a lunch party with some friends, and there were a few different families. The family hosting the party, the get-together, had a beautiful garden, and we were looking at this garden. We really admired it. It was a beautiful work of art. Excuse me here, kicking my tripod. And of course, what followed next was deer repellent or fencing, right? What do you do? Because if you have a garden, especially in Pennsylvania, you're going to have to fence or do something. And this person had tried every repellent there was. Nothing worked. And I addressed it, or I mentioned that the issue is we have an overpopulation of deer. That no matter what you do, you're going to run into problems. And someone responded saying, that's not fair because we took their home. The deer have nowhere to go. That's why they're in our yards. Development is a real issue, not for the deer, and I'm going to explain why. I'm also going to address the real issue with the deer overpopulation, and it's not coming from a place of hate towards the deer. I love deer. I've loved deer my whole life. They're amazing animals. They're like the biggest animal we have here, other than like a black bear. But in Pennsylvania, in this part, there's elk in some places, but besides the point. Anyways, it comes from a place of love. As someone who is a lifelong hunter, as a conservationist, I consider myself a conservationist. I'm always trying to conserve things, make things better, restore them to how they once were. So it is coming from a place of love, and we're going to address these things. Today, we're going to discuss how the deer populations got so high, how they are thriving in a world of development, unlike many other species. We're going to also discuss solutions, and we're going to discuss the impacts the deer have on these native ecosystems, how we can fix that, and how we can restore our ecosystems. If you live in the East Coast, it might surprise you to know that 100 years ago, seeing a deer was pretty rare. In 1905, there were as few as 1,000 deer in the whole state of Pennsylvania. You compare that to today, that's hard to believe. How did we get there? Well, we got there with unregulated hunting and deforestation. I mean, Pennsylvania was essentially clear-cut, and it was a dark time for the state in that way, right? Other areas thrived, but ecologically, environmentally, it was a desert, right? There was nothing. And so that played a big part in that. And that changed. So in 1905, there were 1,000 deer. And the Game Commission had already been formed. I think the Game Commission was formed in like 1895, late 1800s. And they realized we're in trouble. And so and I think it was 1907, they made hunting doe. You were no longer allowed to hunt doe because deer can't reproduce, right? Each doe is going to have 1 to 3 fawns a year. So they stopped the hunting of doe. They started to regulate hunting, which would help. They even started to introduce deer from a few different states, such as I think it was like Kentucky, North Carolina, Michigan, and a few others, where they started to reintroduce deer from. And they would get deer from places like that where they had already started their project to restore the deer populations before Pennsylvania. So we were kind of in a pretty bad spot. These states were a little further ahead, so much so that we could take some deer from them and bring into the state to try and restore populations. So a mix of reintroduction and regulating hunting were the first steps that they took. So they now had started to work on restoring the deer populations. As they were reintroducing deer, the clear-cut forests began to reproduce again. They started to grow. And then you had very young forests made of thickets. Thickets are perfect deer habitat. So you're bringing more deer in, you're limiting the hunting, and you have a perfect habitat for them everywhere. This helped a lot. We went from 1,000 deer in 1905 to 1928, we had 1 million deer in the state. That's insane. In such a short time, 21 years, you look at what changed. amazing. Today in Pennsylvania, we have 1.5 million deer. That is 30 deer per square mile. Sounds like a lot, and it is. So before the European settlement, there were 8 to 10 deer per square mile. So 10 deer per square mile. Today it's 30 per square mile. Now consider the amount of development we have today. There was essentially no development before European settlement. Okay? So now you had no development in Penn's Woods, Pennsylvania, packed full of forest with only 8 to 10 deer per square mile. How? Why were there so few deer? Predators. Pennsylvania historically had wolves and mountain lions that kept these animals in check. One mountain lion could take 40 to 50 deer a year, okay? So they were kept in check by predators. And I always tell people this, animals are far better at managing populations than we are. I believe we could do it, but our track record doesn't show it, right? I mean, you look at the passenger pigeon, billions decimated, gone, now extinct, in a very short time. You look at before European settlement, you look at predators that kept deer in check, and it seemed to be a perfect circle of life, right? A thriving ecosystem. So I always find that interesting, how well predators handle populations. I don't know of wolves or mountain lions making something go extinct, right? Like they have evolved together over these times. That's why prey are so fast. You know, these things have all evolved together over tens of thousands of years, that they know how to live and thrive together. Okay, so getting off topic, that really wasn't where I wanted to go with that, but we now have 30 per square mile. In the 1400s, it was 8 to 10 per square mile. Let's talk about the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey has 125,000 deer. It does not sound like a whole lot compared to 1.5 million. Pennsylvania is also a lot bigger though, so you have to consider that. In the state of New Jersey, there are more deer than there are teachers and nurses. And there are over 112 deer per square mile in New Jersey, I think it was. And in some places of New Jersey, there are over 270 deer per square mile. Can you imagine? Per square mile, 270 deer. So how do we go in places like New Jersey, places like Pennsylvania, from near zero deer to far too many deer? And that answer lies with part of it in how adaptable the white-tailed deer is. So deer are often thought as deep forest dwelling animals, okay? I think a lot of people have this idea that deer are deep in the forest, and I think that's kind of where that comment at the beginning of the video stemmed from, when this person thinking that, well, we took their home, that's why there's too many of them. The reality is deer do not like to sleep deep in a forest. Deer are often found on the edges of a forest, right? A forest edge habitat. And in our modern landscape today, we have created a deer paradise because everywhere you look are a perfect deer edge habitat. The edge of a forest, whether between a road, whether between a forest in a park, a forest in a yard, a highway, a shopping center even, right? All of these places, at least in Pennsylvania, a lot of the places, there is a nice little strip of woodland next to each neighborhood, right? They seem to always leave a little patch of trees, and deer thrive in that habitat because on that edge, you're going to get more sunlight coming in, right? When you get more sunlight, you'll get more vegetation, which means more food. You also get more thickets. Deer prefer thickets because they feel safe in there. So that's what happened, is we have created a deer paradise. Two other things gave deer a great advantage, and that is the lack of predators, which I kind of already addressed, right? No more wolves, no more mountain lions by 1900 in Pennsylvania.
Dad?
Historically, coyotes did not live in Pennsylvania. Coyotes were more in the Midwest. They moved in after those animals were gone. And there's Thea waving. So they moved in, but the coyotes are not nearly as good at hunting deer as a mountain lion or wolves. So they're not doing as good of a job. Okay. So predators, and the other is our hunting patterns. And what I mean by that is you think how much of the state used to be hunted. Well, one, hunting is drastically decreased. Far less hunters today than before. But also our hunting patterns, the amount of development we have, all the neighborhoods we have, people are not hunting from those neighborhoods. Okay. A lot of the times there's restrictions, firearm restrictions even. So because of that, a lot of the hunting is happening on public land where everyone goes to hunt. Not everybody has property to hunt on. So you might have suburbs full of deer, maybe 100 per square mile, with no hunting going on. So that hunting's happening somewhere else where maybe the population's more in check.
Dad, you see the spider web at the...
Yeah, I see the spider web.
Uh-huh.
So I keep saying how adaptable deer are. And I think this shows in their diet. Deer are very adaptable generalists, meaning they eat many different plants. They're not a specialist. They are a generalist. They tend to eat whatever. And I say that because one of the most common things people look for in plants, especially I'm a little backyard nursery, a native plant nursery, and everyone is looking for deer resistant plants. And I tell them what is deer resistant on paper. This is supposed to be deer resistant. And they're always usually follow up, what do you mean supposed to? Well, I say that because I have heard of deer eating just about everything, other than maybe ferns. I don't think they eat hay-scented fern due to like a chemical in there, but a toxin. Anyways, it messes with their digestion, so they don't really eat hay-scented fern. So oftentimes you'll see just that. Getting off track. People always talk about deer-resistant plants, and I've heard them, milkweed is supposed to be deer-resistant. I've heard of deer eating milkweed. Does that mean all deer do? No, we don't know, and that we'll get into that more later. But anyways, people talk about that. They'll eat all of their ornamental plants, their vegetable plants. They can eat everything. And this also kind of plays a part into why they are so bad. Well, I'm getting off topic again. We'll get in that later. But deer are very good generalists. They can eat everything. And that helps with this changing world. The deer adapt far quicker than anything else. In some places, there's woodland songbirds that really need a woodland like this, a deep forest to thrive in. Same with the amphibians. All of this development, as that happens, these species are getting wiped out. They're not like the deer who can adapt. I mean, very few animals you could find in a business park one night, the next night in a cul-de-sac. That's like a deer, maybe a raccoon as well, but they're adaptable also. So, like I said, a lot of people have a misconception that we've taken their homes, that's why they're in our yard. We've forced them into our yards. In reality, we have taken the homes of many other species, but the deer are doing just fine. We have removed their predators for the most part, the big ones, and we have created more food for them, which is why we are seeing so many of them and why their populations are not declining like many other species. So, there are a lot of deer. Why is that a problem? Too many deer can literally change the face of a forest, like this one right in front of us. An overabundant deer herd acts like an army of relentless gardeners, except they're not picking out the invasives, they're picking out the good native plants, leaving the invasives. Deer are selective browsers. So that means they will eat everything from wildflowers, tree seedlings, and avoid the unpalatable plants like the non-native invasives. And that's not to say deer can never be found eating invasives, because it does happen. I think part of that is because it tends to be all that's left. The deer wipe out all of the good native vegetation and leave behind the invasive plants. And so then I've had people tell me before, but I've seen them eat autumn olive. I've seen them eat honeysuckle. I've seen them eat privet. Well, if you live in a desolate an ecological desert where all you have are those species, yes, deer will eat that. So in a healthy forest, a bit of deer browsing is natural. But whenever they are overpopulated, like today, they devour nearly all new growth of plants. So biologists estimate that a single deer can eat about 7 pounds of twigs and buds a day. That's about 4,200 seedling tips browsed per day. Multiply that by dozens of deer and a small woodlot, and you can see why there is very little regeneration of forest. Look ahead right here. Let's see if we can spot. I mean, there's a very old crabapple tree right here. There's invasive Japanese stiltgrass everywhere, invasive Japanese barberry, invasive autumn olive. But as far as the youngest trees, I mean, here's a shagbark hickory that's, 15 years old, 20 years old, So, I mean, other than that, I don't see any young trees. None. So this is a perfect example. This forest right here in front of us, unfortunately, this forest is my backyard, is what makes a perfect example of deer overpopulation, okay? There is no good understory. There are no young trees or shrubs or thickets. If there are, they're invasive. There was a study in northwest Pennsylvania in the Allegheny National Forest that found between 1929 and 1995, deer density jumped from 10 to 30 per square mile. Over 80% of the forest herb and shrub species vanished. The only thing left were a few plants that deer don't eat. So walk into a deer overbrowsed woods like this. Tall trees above with almost no vegetation below deer height. So right here, the only vegetation below deer height are invasive plants or plants that they can't eat. Valley Forge National Historic Park documented this. By the 2000s, they had little or no habitat for a whole range of wildlife because deer eliminated the understory. So this is kind of what I already mentioned, but there is a lack of forest regeneration. If one deer can eat 4,200 seedlings in a day, imagine 30 deer per square mile doing that. And in some places we know it's over 100 deer per square mile. So when the old trees die off, they aren't being replaced. Whereas in a healthy forest, when a tree is dying, every other tree around it is reaching for that sunlight. They can't wait to grow more and fill in that space. So this limits the amount of species that can regenerate. In much of the Northeast, I talk about this all the time, the oak is a keystone species. And because deer eat these seedlings, these oaks are not regenerating like they should be. In Wisconsin, they found that hemlock and cedar were not producing due to deer browsing. This is detrimental when so many of these plants are already threatened from invasive species. I heard something the other day, I'm going to butcher this statistic, but there's you should follow him. His name's Andrew the Arborist. He's an arborist, and his name's Andrew. But he's from the Philadelphia area, and I think he's working on a YouTube video on this right now. I'm very interested to see it when it comes out. But it's like every 10 years. Well, he talks about all of the introduction of new pests, insects, pathogens, how often they're being introduced to the United States. Oftentimes it leads to just a lot of like a nuisance, like stink bugs, the spotted lanternfly. But then you have things like the Japanese beetle. But then you have more destructive ones that have literally killed entire species of trees, whether an insect or a pathogen. And he's doing a video on this. I'm getting off topic, but on this topic of invasives, it's very interesting that the forests are already struggling so much. These species are already struggling so much. It seems every 10 years there is another tree species that is facing extinction. So you have beech bark disease, you have Dutch elm disease, the ash boring beetle. all of these, I mean, the chestnut blight in the early 1900s. So this video he's working on, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to talk more about that. And the point why I even mention that, the point I'm trying to make is we look at the damage deer are doing. You add to it the damage that invasive plants and insects and pathogens are having. These forests need all the help they can get. They are in a very dangerous place. So our forest should be a lot more diverse than they are. I think a lot of people imagine a closed canopy forest is a healthy forest. When you have a closed canopy forest, a forest isn't reproducing. You have no understory. You don't have the thickets you need. You lack the spring ephemerals, and all of this is a result of deer and other poor management practices going away, other management practices going away, being replaced with poor management. A lot of people have the mindset, leave it. That's how a forest needs to be. It needs to be left untouched. Maybe that worked 600 years ago, but even then it really didn't, because if it was left untouched, then maybe a lightning strike would happen and the whole East Coast would burn. And that would be exactly what that forest needed to stay healthy. So this closed canopy forest, you have no understory, you have no thickets, you have no spring ephemerals. Deer play a huge part in this. Studies show wherever there are deer, lots of them, I should say, there is less diversity of native plants. There are more invasive plants. More deer means less native plants and more invasive plants. Something else, a lot of people ask me about this when I talk about things, allowing things to grow up, is ticks. And I'm going to make a separate video on ticks, one similar to this, kind of like a deep dive, a lot of research, but that's not today's video. But deer play a major role in ticks and Lyme disease. Okay, more deer, more ticks, more Lyme disease. When I told my dad I was making this video, he mentioned I should talk about deer collisions, and I hadn't even thought of that. You think of the amount of collisions that happen, the amount of dead deer you see on the road, the amount of damages. It's massive. I can't remember the number. It was like $10 billion in damages a year from from animal strikes, deer being the majority of them. That's a lot of money. Then you think people even die from it. There are collisions where people die, oftentimes motorcycles. Still, people, it doesn't matter who or how, it's terrible. So the amount of death, the amount of damages cause a lot. So we have learned, without the checks and balances, without things keeping the deer in check, they run rampant, they devastate the ecosystems, and they don't have those predators keeping them in check as they did before. And a lot of it might sound like we're hating on deer, and we're not. I really do love deer, and at the end of the day, it's not healthy for the deer too. So we have to consider that. The deer are not healthy like they once were. There's a lot more disease in deer today. They're skinnier. You know, there are a lot of real problems. So let's talk about carrying capacity. Ecologists talk about carrying capacity, the number of animals an environment can support without being degraded. In the eastern woodlands, that's actually really low. Experts say a healthy forest can sustain anywhere from like 5 to 15 deer per square mile. And we know we're at 30 per square mile across the whole state of Pennsylvania. That's about roughly 1 deer per 64 to 128 acres. Some studies, 8 to 12 were on the upper limit for maintaining forest health. So when the forests are intact and there was no development and there were still predators, it was 8 to 10. So when we go up to 20, 30, or even 50 plus deer per square mile, we're far above that ecological carrying capacity. Deer outstrip their food supply. Stripped of vegetation, no young trees, and deer are in poor health. So what happens when this carrying capacity is exceeded? They survive by eating anything edible and wipe out species by doing so. If unchecked, eventually they will suffer themselves because food becomes scarce and they face malnutrition or disease. nature will correct in extreme measure through starvation or illness. Experts in New Jersey warn that it will eventually result in the decline of deer as they eliminate all their food sources. So the goal is to manage herds so that they are healthy and our forest can regenerate. And I keep saying this, but that is the goal of it all. It might sound like we need to get rid of deer. They're our biggest problem. Yeah, good job. Thea's finding mushrooms. In reality, we're doing this for the deer. We want to create a better habitat for the deer. We want to create a better habitat for all of the species. So some management strategies. How do we solve this? Well, there's a few different ways. Do you have any ideas, Thea?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
I play tennis toys.
She plays with toys.
Okay.
So there are a few ways, and one of them is through regulated hunting. When I was a kid, I remember thinking, and you know, a lot of us thought we should not take any deer, or I'm sorry, any doe, because if you take doe, you could be killing off something that was about to carry the biggest buck in Pennsylvania ever, right? I think a lot of us have thought that. Don't shoot doe. You kill one doe, that's like killing 3 deer a year. You kill 2 doe, that's like 6, and so on. So I think a lot of people had this misconception that you shouldn't hunt doe. If you do, you're going to get rid of all your deer. I now realize we're not doing that through hunting. You can max out your tags, and you're probably not going to play a huge part on the deer population. Some of the other solutions to the deer overpopulation people have are Thea made a bed out of Japanese stiltgrass. This whole area is Japanese stiltgrass, and because it's an annual, it pools very easily, and so she's just made a giant bed with it. But I've heard of landowners, and I think like the Penn State Extension has suggested this, and I've seen people do this, where if you have maybe 8 acres or 10 acres, or maybe not even that much, but it's a lot of money to do this, but people will actually enclose that area with a fence for like 10 years. And you kind of move it from each part of your land, or you do as much as you can. That allows the forest to regenerate. So it isn't a bad idea, because after so many years, those trees will be strong enough, whether a buck rub or it's getting nibbled at, whatever, they will survive. So it's a great idea, just not practical for the average person. I can't fence off a giant part of my woods. So some landowners do that, but I don't see the state or even the federal level doing something like that, funding something like that. So another thing people talked about is fertility control. I think some people, this interests them, but it's really not that effective. I don't know how humane it is. Not effective, and it's very costly. It's very expensive. And so might sound good on paper, but that's, I don't think, a realistic solution to this. Another is trapping and relocating. Again, very expensive. And a lot of studies show that relocating deer actually causes a lot of stress on them and is not the best thing for them. And either way, I don't know of a lot of places that need white-tailed deer. I think most places have these problems. So I would say those are the main management practices. Oh, there's one more. That is the reintroduction of predators. Nobody wants wolves in their backyard. I get it. If we're not going to bring back wolves, well, then you better get hunting. If you don't like hunting and you own land, then you should find some good hunters that you trust and allow them to hunt your land. If you can't kill the deer yourself, find someone that can, and find a good hunter. There are hunters sometimes get a bad rap, but a lot of them care deeply about the environment, these ecosystems, and these animals, and they want to help. So keep that in mind. So I would say the reintroduction of predators is the most natural solution. It's got the greatest record. Wolves and mountain lions do a very good job. But again, it's so developed. I understand it's not practical. Yeah, I don't know what it would be like. To me, it kind of sounds cool, but I'm sure it's cool until, tragedy happens, right? So, although uncommon with mountain lions, people can be killed. So, maybe it's not that cool, but it works in other places. Anyways, the point I'm saying is that would be the most natural solution, but I think we're too far past that. So, if we're not going to do that, I think we should pick up your hunting rifle, get your license, get hunting. One other thing I forgot when mentioning the predators is there was a study that showed if mountain lions, just mountain lions, not even wolves, were reintroduced to the east, deer collisions would decrease by 22%. I don't know how they figure that out, but I do know that a mountain lion can take like 40 to 50 deer in a year. So maybe they figure that out somehow. People smarter than me. I don't know. But when you have those predators, it does create a landscape where deer live in fear. Right now, they don't really live in fear. I mean, we got a fully loaded pear tree not far from me right now. Deer are there all the time, and we're working in our yard, and they don't care. When predators are reintroduced, deer can't browse a whole area as long as they'd like to. So maybe you have a part of your property that's all oaks. Deer can't spend hours nibbling and eating all of those young oak seedlings because they're stressed that there are predators out here. I need to be on edge at all times. So, kind of wrapping up, I think this is a message like many of the videos I share where I talk about, I shouldn't say many, some of the videos I do where I kind of present like some scary sounding information. Almost sounds like there's no hope. Sounds like it's too far gone. I think this kind of sounds like that. At the end, I like to give some hope that I don't think it's too far gone. I think we can make a real difference. I think to do that, education is most important. We need to educate everyone, whether it's by sharing this video. Maybe it's not that good of a video, so maybe don't share it. I think it is, right? Whether it's sharing this video or just taking something you learned from this and sharing it with a friend, or maybe someone that you used to hunt with who no longer hunts. There were a few years I wasn't hunting, and it was only because of the job I had. Hunting season, you had no days off, and I worked all the time, and so I didn't hunt for a few years. That's one less person taking deer, right? So you think about that. There are things being done in the state of Pennsylvania. They have increased doe tags, and there's more controlled hunting in certain places to help with the deer overpopulation. So I think a lot of states realize where we're at, but I know that they can't do it alone. And I know that just by increasing tags isn't going to be the answer. And I say that because more people aren't hunting still. At least from what I've heard, hunting numbers aren't increasing. They're far below the peak level. So those are some things to keep in mind. But I just feel that, like with all of these problems we face, there is no one easy solution. It takes education. To me, that's the most important thing. Educate your friends, educate people you know, especially if you own land and you're not hunting it. Get someone that does want to hunt it. Find an ethical hunter, because they exist. A lot of these hunters care. So, education. Thea, what happened? Okay, so she said Ty walked to Yaya's and a mountain lion got him. He's not here?
You want to see that?
What's this?
Ty.
No, it's just a bunch of Japanese stilt grass.
It's Ty. Ty, now.
The kids just spent a few minutes pulling all of these weeds, and they could enough to cover up Ty. Ty! This is the first use I have found with Japanese stilt grass. That and a good fire starter when it dies off. Let's see, come on out! Ty! Ah! So yeah, all this stilt grass. Anyways, we're gonna wrap things up here. So this and wrapping up, we talked about the development today that we have created an ideal habitat for deer while removing their predators, more food for deer. And it comes down to, we do this because we care about the deer, we care about this world, and it needs managed. So we need to educate, and I do think things can get better. So thank you for watching. I'm sure this is a very long video. I did a lot of research for this. To put it in a 10-minute video is just not possible. There are great channels out there that can do that, I guess. I'm not one of them. I've studied about this for a while now. Some late nights reading when everyone's asleep and gathering all this information, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Yeah, it was all talking, but that's kind of what this channel is it's almost more educational in a way. So thanks for watching, thanks for being here. And share this video with a friend, maybe someone that likes hunting, or maybe someone that doesn't like hunting. Because that's really what it needs to happen. We need to change the way we think. And, I think of movies like Bambi as a kid, right? Bambi probably did more damage to native ecosystems than invasive plants. Kind of a joke, right? But I don't think Bambi helped our native ecosystems at all. I think there was a lot of propaganda from a movie like Bambi on how bad hunting is. And I get it. No one wants to kill a cute little deer. But if you want a cute little deer to live a good life, we need to hunt. So, getting off topic again, but that's all we got for today. All right, here was the last filming location, okay? I was just sitting on that log. But the kids were with me and they're gone. I lost the kids. Kate's not home and the kids are gone. I don't know what to do. Let's take a look. Wait a second. I hear something. What is that? Ah! Thea! Your costume. Boy, who knew how much fun Japanese still crash could be? Can you help me find Ty? Ah! Come on out. Let's see.
I'm in a costume.
Stand up. I want to see. Wow.